We're going to kick off our debate by talking about scouting in non-league. It seemed appropriate because right now is obviously we're just coming into the summer period, and we've seen this week, especially at Merstham, players coming in and out for all the clubs really. We'll kick off there. Fabio Sareva, we touched on it, as moved to Woking, and that's a great move for him. How does that leave you now? What's your jobs for the summer? How hard is scouting to then go and replace a player that has done so well for you?
There's no doubt that Fabio did very well. So what we're all doing at Merstham now is mildly panicking. Fabio has been a very important cog in the wheel at Merstham. But football is football, and you can't stand in the way of players, as I said earlier. And I think, as all these guys will tell you, a big part of football management is having the contacts to be able to improve and replace. And so when players move on, it's no drama, it's no concern. You have to, particularly I think at a club like Merstham, have a production line and an idea of how you can always replace them.
And quite interesting as well, Charlie Penny, who played at Merstham for most of the seasons, also moved to Woking, but he was on loan from Dulwich and Hamlet. So you've seen a player there again develop up into the Vanarama Conference.
Yeah, I mean, it's at Dulwich for Charlie is unfortunate because he came with a niggly injury, and he couldn't really get fit. He couldn't really get started. So obviously the relationship we have with Merstham and Hayden is a good fit for him to go and play some games. And as we can all see, from the time he left us in October, is it?
Yeah.
Towards the end of the season, end of October, he scored himself a lot of goals, and he's a goal scorer. He's earned himself a good move.
Let's throw this out, Mark. I'm going to start with you. As far as scouting in non-league football, how difficult a process is that? I mean, we all read the papers and watch the news, and we see that all these players that are touted to go to Premier League clubs, Championship clubs. How difficult is it, and how different is it when you move down to this level and you're trying to recruit and build a team again for next year?
Well, I think you're relying upon kind of fortunate infrastructure unless you make the decision to invest, money into people going around other teams and watching them. I mean, I can only speak from our perspective. There's lots of players to be that can normally step up. It's just a case of having the time to get to watch them, or having contacts within your club that will do so for you and give regular reports. We invested last year in a scout for the first time, and felt the benefit from both a player recruitment perspective and watching other sides. But of course, on top of that, on top of that, there's an organic effect as well. The names of players you'll see touted about in the newspapers. It's always easier to recruit a top striker because they're advertised in terms of their goal scoring ratio. Not so easy midfielders and wingers really. Again, clean sheets give away a few good defenders and keepers. But I think it's probably the most undervalued asset that clubs at this level have got at their disposal that they don't utilise. But as we're going to come on to, probably at this level of football, you are restricted by time and money.
I think that with the scouting, there's a couple of really important issues that you need to look at. First of all, I've had loads of scouts work for me and they recommend players, and unless you actually see them yourself half a dozen times, you can't work out how they're going to fit into your model. Junior's had a great example with that. In signing Ryan Moss from Margate, who personally I thought was the best centre forward in the league when he was with Kingstonian. Went to Margate, very good player, proven goal scorer, and for whatever reason, sometimes these things don't quite work. For me also, it's about, you've got to buy into the person, because I've seen loads of players that I think will fit into the makeup of my team, but when you meet them, I wouldn't have them anywhere near the dressing room. So there's all sorts of dynamics that you've got to consider, and just having players recommended, seeing them once or twice, seeing that what they're doing in a different environment, in my view, is nowhere near enough.
It must be, we touched on it just then, but it must be so much harder then in the non-league, because you don't have the benefits of a striker being on Sky Sports News and scoring goals and knowing a little bit about them before you start. So you really have to, like you said, get that player into the club and find out a little bit more about, what they're like. How on a time frame, how does that work? That was my next question to move on to. Perhaps I'll bring Ant in on this one. For a time frame, how does it work when you bring a player into a club? How long do you have to give it before you say, you know what, I know they're going to be fit to my club?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm at the lowest level of football here compared to these guys, and probably from my point of view, it's a lot different. We don't go out scouting players. At the end of the day, we run off our infrastructure at the club, what comes through, because that's how our club, that's our model that we run to. As you go up the levels, you obviously need to go into it a lot, with a lot more time, effort, money, which at this moment in time we don't have to do. But like Mark said, it's all about who you know, really, your contacts. That's the way you're going to get to know a player. He might not fit in at one club, but like Aidan said, he might know a player that would fit into another club. And exactly what Aidan said there, that person's still got to be right for the club. He might be a great player, score you a lot of goals, but he might upset the other 9 or 10 that are in your dressing room. So as for a time frame on it, you have to act quick, because you don't get, there's only 4 or 5 weeks rest period. When the pre-season starts, you've probably only got another 4 weeks, probably 2 or 3 weeks to make your decision, to get it right, to start brightly at the beginning of the season.
We look at East Grinstead, for example. They've made 8 signings already, including a goalkeeper, 3 defenders, 3 midfielders and a striker. That's obviously a really high turnaround at a club. Would you try and... We talked off air, Hayden, a little bit about next season, and you said you probably need one more through the door. It's obviously a lot better if you can keep a core team together and only have to add and fit one more player into a squad.
I personally think it's a big mistake in non-league football, and players, managers do this a lot. Every year they want to rip it up and start again. I think the secret to building a successful team is continually improving the team. As an example, Junior is not going to go out, Mark is not going to go out in 2 clubs that have had really excellent seasons and rip it up and start again. They're going to fine-tune it and bring the right personnel into it. It's all about bringing the right personnel into the club. Now, I can't speak for East Grinstead. I'm sure that there's good reasons, but for me, there would have to be very various things going wrong, very serious things going wrong, for me to have that turnaround of players in one season, because I think you're starting all over again every year.
We're going to bring in Paul, because I was going to ask whether it's a different in the ladies' perspective, actually.
Well, it's nice to have the opportunity to sort of present the view from a ladies' perspective. Obviously, at the very senior level of the ladies' game, it's now professional, and so the fact that it's professional means that scouting is a critical part of the success of those clubs. At our level, what is very, very apparent is that as that game has professionalised at the top and the success of the England team, many, many clubs around our level are absolutely upping their game. There's no question. More and more traditionally men's professional football clubs are interested in having a strong ladies section. Many are now affiliating with clubs at our level, and a classic for us in this season was AFC Wimbledon, who really got heavily involved with a club of the same name a couple of years ago. We're struggling at the bottom of our league. Within two years, with resources going in, they absolutely transformed that club, and they ran away with our league quite comfortably. The point about the scouting thing is, we started to see clubs where they have had the professional affiliation. You start to see managers or people from their clubs coming to watch your game. So that's back to the point that's made earlier. It's about the resources. As more and more resources come into the game, even at our level, it allows you to undertake those types of activity.
Creating a great environment is probably the massively helps a club. The failure in a lot of these clubs that sign mass players tends to be they sign mass players, then the manager gets moved on, then they sign mass players, and that just evolves, and that's what you call relegation candidates every year. Same theory, but we're really fortunate. I know, for instance, Anthony with Horley and Ashley stayed there so many years because the environment's right. Every time we try to sign a player, they don't take much convincing. They know it's a good club to play for. They hear good things about it. And going back to a point Hayden touched on, because I think the pet hate of most managers at this non-league level is players that apparently would rather play for money than the club, you know, it's almost like, you know, job recruitment to a degree. If the CV's quite small in terms of they play someone for 2 years, 3 years, and they're 24 years old, then there's a great chance they value loyalty and the club above everything else. So they're the ones we really target.
Yeah, definitely.